Welcome, and thank you for joining our webinar, Novel Technologies for Sustainable Soy-Based Surfactants. I'm your moderator, Chris Weigel from OmniTech International. We appreciate you spending your lunchtime with us and hope that everyone and their families is continuing to stay healthy and that business is doing well. I'd like to thank our guest speakers for joining us today. We have a very full but an exciting agenda for our webinar. With us today, we have three industry experts, each with either a unique surfactant product offering or licensable technology. And we will hear the perspective on how soy's attributes translate to performance benefits in a multitude of surfactant applications. We ask that if you have any questions or comments, please type them into the Q&A box. And then if your question is specifically for one of the speakers, we ask that you include that person or company's name with your question. And then we'll get to as many questions as time allows after our panel discussion, or we will reply back to you after the webinar. Before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to provide a brief introduction of soy and surfactant applications. Many of you may not be aware, but soy is used in a broad range of applications today. This includes emulsifiers, cleaners, oil and gas industry, laundry, personal care, and agricultural applications. In fact, soy has been used in surfactants for decades, starting with soy lecithin, which was popularly used for emulsifiers for food applications, stabilizers, lubricants, and wetting agents. And over the years, chemical transformation of soybean oil has resulted in a vast expansion into many other applications. Propoxylated and ethoxylated soybean oil offers performance benefits in dispersants for oil field, coatings and inks, and agricultural applications. Furthermore, hydrogenated soybean oil is a common intermediate, as is soy fatty acid. Imidazolines, amine oxides, and amine ethoxylates are useful for quaternary compounds and corrosion inhibitors. Plus, you have soy-based cationic and amphoteric surfactants and conditioning agents, and they have applications in a multitude of applications such as personal care market. So why is soy used in surfactants? Well, first of all, soy is one of the most economical and sustainable bio-based feedstocks in the US. More than 95% of the US soybean farmers participate in what's called the US Soy Sustainable Assurance Protocol. This is focused on 4 sustainability directives, including biodiversity, conservation, public labor, health and welfare, and continuous improvement in technology and cultural practices. Furthermore, soy-based surfactants enhance the customer's experience since US grown crop contributes to meeting the UN Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. New varieties of high oleic soybean oil provide a new platform chemistry for surfactants, which we'll be hearing about today. And lastly, genetically modified and non-genetically modified varieties are available. While soy has been used for many years in surfactant applications, there have been 2 major emerging opportunities. In the past 2 decades, fermentation processes enabled companies to expand into biosurfactants such as phospholipids and rhamnolipids. Secondly, surfactants are rapidly gaining commercial traction for a wide range of applications, utilizing high oleic soybean oil for applications such as household and institutional cleaning, agricultural, remediation, and personal care, as we will learn more about today also. Now, I think we can agree that it can be a challenge to find a surfactant with high bio-based content that is also stable in a wide range of pH environments and is useful in multiple cleaning applications, which is why I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker, Dan Garbark. Dan is a synthetic chemist with 19 years experience in chemical formulation in addition to process and product development. He has created novel approaches in the focus areas of bio-based products, leading to 23 granted US patents, along with 20 pending US patent applications. Mattel, with funding from the USB, has developed a platform of surfactant technologies based on high oleic soybean oil to replace anionic, non-ionic, and amphoteric surfactants in detergents. And the high oleic soybean oil surfactants contain specific functionalities tailored for targeting stain removal, and is fully water dispersible. At this time, we ask that you give your full attention to Dan as he explains to us why high oleic soybean oil surfactants and demonstrates proven results in applications such as laundry, hard surface cleaning, and enhanced oil recovery. Dan, would you like to lead us off?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And thank you everyone for your time and coming to this. We'll just go ahead and dive right in to give you a quick background of Battelle for those unfamiliar. Battelle is the largest nonprofit contract research organization in the world. We do both contract research for industrial and government clients, along with managing labs like your national energy labs. So for example, Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Los Alamos, amongst others. So even though we're a nonprofit, thank you. Even though we're a nonprofit, we do run like a for-profit company where our profits are then invested in philanthropy and STEM education. So Battelle's been doing work in making chemical products from soybean starting feedstocks for about 25 years. We like to break it down. It's predominantly oil or soy meal, and the soy meal gets separated further into protein and carbohydrates. And so you're identifying these starting materials and choosing applications and chemistries to support conversion. So for example, the protein is used largely in soy adhesives, while the oil has gone into everything from polyols and lubricants to surfactants. So now we just look at why are we doing this and why does it make sense? So first off, anionic and non-ionic surfactants correlate to the largest use, 4.8 billion and 3.9 billion pounds per year. And so I'd say amphoterics are also a newer growing material. It has a lower CAGR right now, but I expect that to pick up as they're incorporated and they switch out other chemistries over time. Now for us, our main focus was in detergents because that's the largest market at 14.3 billion pounds estimated for 2022. Personal care, we did not look into just because of, more regulations and testing that needs to be done for personal care applications, but we did look at other applications such as oil field chemicals. So why high oleic? Well, on the right here, I have drawn the linoleic portion, which is about 60% of your commodity soybean oil, and it's the epoxide once you oxidize. And really with oleic, you only have one. And so that leads to less functionalization, which means less of other material that you have to react with your soy, giving you a higher percentage of soy, and also a more idealized structure. So high oleic soys, depending on the variety, have lower amounts of saturates. So you have less palmitic and stearic acid to contend with, which gains you nothing as far as reacting for higher functionality. The other part of it is when you're using things that are hindered or, hindered alcohols or carboxylic acids, when you ring open the first epoxy of the linoleic, there's a favorable reaction and rearrangement that turns it into a tetrahydrofuranol structure. But that reaction can also happen across other fatty acids, so you're building molecular weight. And what happens is when you go to try to make this into a surfactant for laundry, your dilution causes you to get some gelation materials. And so the only way you can use commodity soy is if you have a highly reactive hydroxyl. So what was it that we were working on? We were looking at oleic soybean as a platform chemical in order to do conversions and create all different functionalities and evaluate those functionalities to see changes in things like stain removal. So we can have up to 100% bio-based, depending on our reactants, but typically we're at least 60% by weight soybean oil. You could also run that calculation for carbons. It just comes out better for the soybean oil. We can create cationic, anionic, amphoteric, non-ionic surfactants. Because we're doing ether bonds, typically, we have a high stability at that material. So your storage shelf life, if you add an ester, it would just hydrolyze over time. We've created dual purpose, which was the original thought for doing this chemistry, to make things that are fatty acid based surfactants, but they have building capability on them. And I'll show you some later. And then obviously there's a wide range of applications that surfactants can be used in other than just cleaners. So in general, we produced 49 candidates synthesized from high oleic soybean oil, 55 total, so 6 were from commodity soy. Our initial candidates we were focusing on were based on hydroxy acids, so citric, lactic, and malic acids. And really what we were doing is reacting with the ethyl citrate or ethyl lactate. So you react with the hydroxyl and then you sulfonify at the end. But we also looked at some ethoxylates and propoxylates of those materials. And the reason there is you can increase your reactivity of the hydroxyl, which changes and speeds up your reactions and reaction times and temperatures. Other functionalities we looked at were amines and derivatives such as an oxide, PEGs and PEG monoethers, polypropylene glycol, monoethers also, sulfonates, hydroxysaltanes, and betanes, and even some glucosides towards the end of work. On the right, you can see candidate 2 is the lactic acid ring opened. So you saponify, you now have formed 2 sodium salts on the original fatty acid. So that changes your miscibility. And then on the lower right, you see more of an EDTA structure where it's split with the fatty acid. And there's some specialized applications where that can be useful, where you want a very oil-based chelating agent. So overall, our focus was mainly on laundry, as I mentioned earlier, but we also looked at other areas such as oil and gas, which is enhanced oil recovery. And I just showed you a sequestrant. Early testing, second from the right, you can see we swapped out the non-ionic component. I'll show you the formulation shortly. With the candidate 1, which was the citrate, and we had improved results as far as stain removal. And on the lower right are the Ross-Miles foam height test results. So candidate 25 is an amphoteric. It pretty much runs along the same as sodium lauryl sulfate, SLS. And then a lot of candidates really run along the same type of pattern as a non-ionic. The only one that's a little different, you can see sort of in the middle, it stays the same, is where we have a sulfonate group. And this particular sulfonate is off the middle of the chain. So we actually get less foam initially, but it maintains the foam well. So for our candidates, as I mentioned, conventional soybean oil, especially on a lot of the early unreactive hydroxyls, forms gel globules, so it's not really useful. But we can utilize highly reactive hydroxyls. Think of something like a ethyl salicylate across that epoxy. Most candidates replace non-ionic more readily than anionic. However, as mentioned here at the bottom, betaine functionality actually replaced pretty well the sulfonate candidates such as SDB has. Looking at the relationships to the stains, the citrate improved removal of coffee, cocoa, milk, blood, ink, and red wine. The lactate, which is candidate 2, improved makeup removal. We found that PEG functionality is important for dust sebum removal, although the betaines do pretty well too. And then we've also found that sulfonate functionality targets grass stains. And so on the right here are the standard formulations we used. Standard formulation 1 is really a very basic formulation. So the SXS is just there to keep everything soluble. But the active components are SDBS, turgitol, and sodium carbonate. And that's about a 29% solids. The standard formulation 2 is SLS, potassium cocoate, 2 turgitols, cocoa glucoside, and cocometapropyl betaine. And that is the component we were switching out. And that is about an 18% solids laundry detergent. So just some limited testing results. We have plenty. But what we really wanted to do first was compare our standards to off-the-shelf materials to see an apples and apples comparison and make sure that we were on par from the start. So off-the-shelf original Tide is on the left, 7th generation and Purex, then our standard 1 and 2. And then in this chart, I put over second from the right, candidate 43, which was our scaled up to 30-gallon scale amphiteric. That replaced cocometapropyl betaine. And really what I should mention is all of these except for the Purex are considered equivalent. So plus or minus 10%. And actually all the testing that we discussed today is considered equivalent. So the real interesting result was candidate 48, which was based on a conventional soybean oil. And so we had okay results. In some earlier work with some other branches, it was just slightly worse. So we can produce some candidates from commodity soy, which has availability benefits as far as current. The other is the soy mix that was based off of the standard formulation 1. And so soy mix is all soy surfactants with just a tiny amount of SXS to keep it, all the components miscible together. And so that actually was a surprising formulation in that we got equivalent cleaning with, no SDBS, no turgitol, just all soy materials. So some surface tension results in a lot of our earlier work, we were around a 30 to 40 in comparison to some on the market materials. SDBS is 34, turgitols, and really worked their way up as you add EO groups to 45. And where we later found some interest was in moving to amphiterics, which are at the bottom of the table. And as we moved into those amphiterics, you see candidate 43 is 25.5, so much lower surface tension than our earlier work. So this is great in our hands and at the bench scale, but we needed to prove that it could be taken in other people's hands and increase scale. So Capital Resin Corp in Columbus, Ohio, which is where Patel is located, had scaled this material up to 30 gallons. They took candidate 1, candidate 4, and candidate 43. Most importantly, there were no spectral or performance differences versus the bench to bench scale in other people's hands, and then the bench to the 30-gallon scale. So, and these are very basic pots and pans, so you don't need any specialized equipment. So many who have capacity now would have no trouble as far as capital equipment. Some EcoSAR toxicity predictions. This is available online. Just comparing to things like CTAB and SDBS, SLS, you notice the higher the better. So many of our candidates are better based off of this prediction. And the others are, right on scale with the commodity common materials, both petroleum or cocoa or palm-based materials. So we ran some ready biodegradation testing. Candidate 1 just missed the 10-day window. We ended up as readily biodegradable. That's the citrate. Candidate 2, which is the lactate, went to 50% in 28 days, wasn't quite done. We would expect it to be fully biodegradable. I'll skip down candidate 25. It was also 50%, and it was suggested that We run at lower concentration to determine whether it was readily biodegradable or not. The interesting result, as you'll see, because this was our best enhanced oil recovery material, was candidate 12, but apparently the amine functionality wasn't very much liked by the microbes. So it showed antimicrobial where it did not biodegrade. It just killed all of the microbes. And that was a little bit of a downer because candidate 12 was our best performer and gave some unique properties on contact angles when you're looking at imbibition testing. So we were able to get about 72% improvement in oil recovery in imbibition testing in-house. So what we ended up doing was taking, this is candidate 12 you see here, you can functionalize, you could quaternize the amines, but really what we did was looked at candidate 22, where we were looking at a diethanol mid, and you'll see that here shortly in the hard surface cleaning. But it's a diethanol mid and with a methoxy group at the epoxide. So a much more readily biodegradable material. So for our hard surface cleaning evaluations, formulation 1 was a high builder composition and based off of Cocamid DEA. So you see it's about 30% solids. Then we came back for a second round and looked at a non-ionic based cleaner that was mainly water, so only 5% solids. And in this material, we didn't use our soy surfactant builder. We had used a different technology, which was a soy builder based on soy flour. So looking at the stain results, again, it's plus or minus 10%. Cocamid DEA performed the best, and candidate 25, which was I said was also a diethanol mid, also performed well, pretty equivalent. And candidate 1 was interesting because that's 100% bio-based citrate. It is right at the threshold though for being a little less active. But candidates 4 and 13 were just outside. Candidate 4 is a tri-EG based, and candidate 13 was a builder based that I showed in the picture earlier. So in our second round, we came down and replaced the non-ionic with amphotericin, candidate 25, which performed well, and candidate 1, as we knew from laundry, can replace non-ionics readily. Candidate 4 with the ethoxylate did not perform as well. Looking at rough costing estimates, so we did this at 35 metric ton per day, using the input costs of epoxidized soybean oil at 70 cents a pound and epoxidized soybean oil at 60 cents a pound. And really, we had focused down on 3 main candidates. Candidate 1, the citrate, came out to about 93 cents a pound for break-even pricing. By break-even, I mean CapEx, OpEx, and materials, no profit built into that, and taxes, obviously. Candidates 25 and 43, which is the high Oleic soy butane, is about 89 cents a pound. And then candidates 32 and 48, which are the commodity epoxidized soybean butane, is about 83 cents a pound. And typically epoxidized soybean oil, or traditionally, has been about 50 cents a pound, and that would change the price only by 4 cents. And the reason for that is that you are reacting with more materials when you use commodity soy, so it's the other materials cost that's balancing and offsetting that price. So just to summarize, we made 55 candidates, produced to date, 49 from high oleic soy. Our betanes from both the high oleic soy and the conventional epoxidized soybean oil perform well. We didn't see any difference, meaning that we have a robust, repeatable, and scalable process. We have drop-in replacements for cocamidopropyl butane. There may be some stain trade-offs in the cleaning performance, but overall they come out comparative. Good competitive break-even pricing. We have alternative applications that we have candidates that perform well. Now, candidate 1 performs better than non-ionics in cold water laundry formulations, so 75F water. Swap out the non-ionic, you get improved performance. So that was a little more intriguing. And then obviously we were testing our glucosides more towards the end of the program. So I'd like to thank the United Soybean Board for their years of support in this work, specifically Dwight Rust, who manages and interacts with the Soybean Board, Capital Resin Corp for our scale up, and then my team at Patel. And thank you for your time.
Dan, that was great insight. We appreciate it. Really, congratulations to you and your team. These are impressive results and really an exciting licensable technology. Congratulations on your scale up at Capital Resins. So moving right along, I would like to introduce our next speaker. Rob Comer is Vice President of Research and Development at Colonial Chemical. And in that role, Rob is responsible for the design and development of new surfactants for multiple markets, which includes the personal care, HI&I, industrial lubricants, corrosion inhibition markets. With the funding of the United Soybean Board, Dr. Comer and his team at Colonial have developed approximately 20 candidate surfactants, both from high oleic soybean oil and hydrogenated soybean oil for various markets and applications. And also, I am pleased to say that Colonial Chemical was a 2021 recipient of the EPA Green Chemistry Challenge Award. So at this time, I ask that you give your full attention to Dr. Rob Comer as he enlightened us on the Colonial novel surfactant technology.
Well, thank you, Chris, and thanks everybody for joining in this afternoon. Dan, I thought that we had cast a pretty broad net in developing new surfactants. 55, that's so excellent. As Chris mentioned, to date we've developed about 20 new surfactants, and we'll talk about a few of those today. And again, this is in the area of developing palm-free surfactants based on high oleic soybean oil and hydrogenated soybean oil. So some quick facts about Colonial Chemicals. If you've never heard of us, we are a 34-year-old specialty chemical manufacturing company located in South Pittsburgh, Tennessee. That's about 25 miles west of Chattanooga. If you've ever been to Chattanooga, we're an independently and privately owned company. We're a global supplier to over 730 manufacturers of finished goods, largely in personal care, HI&I, and industrial lubricants. We compete in a global surfactants market that's worth over $39 billion and a US market worth more than 13. Our portfolio of products is represented through a dedicated sales force and also through regional distributors in the US and worldwide. And currently we have roughly 150 employees. Not going to read off everything here, but it gives you a good idea of the capabilities, the breadth of chemistries that we practice on the left in order to produce the range of surfactants that you see there listed on the right. So pretty good representation in the surfactant area. Currently, we have 10 very talented chemists that are developing new products. Next year, we hope to move into a brand new state-of-the-art laboratory. The emphasis for this team is green chemistry, and as much as possible, we try to tick as many of the 12 principles of green chemistry when developing surfactants. We feel that we have the mildest chemistry found in the marketplace. We have data to prove that. So at the end of the talk, if you haven't seen some of this data and you'd like to contact me, please do. And as Chris mentioned, we were very blessed to receive the EPA Green Chemistry Award for our Sugar Boost chemistry, and that was in the category of the design of greener chemicals. So just an aside about soybean oil as a building block. I just, for kicks, I went into the USPTO website and put in soybean and oil as keyword searches, and specifically looking at abstracts, because if you find keywords there, you're probably finding something substantial. I came up with 417 current US patents. And I think that's pretty significant. If you put any other oil in, including palm, including coconut, or anything, you will not get the number of hits that you get with soybean. So there's a lot of people besides the three companies that are presenting today looking at soybean. It's a good source of oleic acid, and that is one of the things that's that I'll mention during the talk. It's critical for its performance. And yes, as was mentioned by Chris in the beginning, it is GMO, but if non-GMO is important for you or your team, there certainly are sources available. So we mentioned that a lot of this work was done in conjunction with the United Soybean Board. We're very grateful for the funding that here at Colonial that we've received for the last 3 years. During that time frame, we've been trying to add value to high oleic soybean and hydrogenated soybean oils as feedstock in the manufacture surfactants. We've been targeting the 13 billion pound US surfactant market, and largely in the areas of personal care, industrial lubricants, and HI&I. We've targeted taking some of our existing products and flipping them over to the use of soybean, as well as developing new products. So the high oleic part of HOSO is very critical for the performance of products developed on the product. What are some of those attributes? Well, it could include thickening of a formulation, coating that's provided by the formulation, conditioning that's provided, lubricity. For those in personal care, you could even add shine. So the oleic content translates to these types of performance characteristics. Some other key drivers besides the performance, the sustainability, the naturalness, the palm-free nature, the environmentally friendly aspects, biodegradable, and cost if you're replacing a more costly source of oleic. Types of surfactants that you'll see talked about in the ensuing slides. We've looked at developing non-ionics, cationics, amphoterics, amine oxides, and organic salts. So we've like Dana's group, cast the net fairly wide. So just some examples. And in these examples, the R group next to the carbonyl in all of these is, of course, then from the high oleic soybean oil or the hydrogenated soybean oil. And then you functionalize that with either a quat, an alkanolamide, a midoamine, such as derived from DMAPA, a phospholipid. Then in the next slide, you see others, sulfobetanes that can be derived from the HOSO, sulfosucconates, betanes, and imidazolines. So this just names a few. There are others, but this just gives you a rough idea of some of the surfactants that we worked at developing. So I thought today we'd just talk about 3 or 4 of the surfactants that we've developed to date. Not going to talk about some more of the proprietary things that we're working on, but these were some low-hanging fruit that I thought we could talk about today. First one is going to feature a hair conditioning ingredient. This is stearinimidopropyl dimethylamine. If we have personal care people out there in the audience, this is practically rolls off your tongue. It's been around for a long, long time. The palm version of this ingredient has been on the market for years. If you look at this P&G patent that I've listed here, you will see that P&G positioned this as a non-quat offering many years ago, and it was the basis for their Pantene Pro V conditioner for many years. They've since moved on, but if you go into your drugstore or supermarket and look at conditioners, you will see stearinimidopropyl dimethylamine and many of them still. The R here is from, in this case, hydrogenated soybean oil. So what would we do with such an ingredient in the lab? So if you go to the next slide, one of the things that we might do is, obviously, if it's going to be in a conditioning formulation, we'd want to prove it conditions. The pictures of a diastron unit, and we'll take a closer look at that in the next slide. But before we do, basically what you do is you mount a truss and you treat the truss with some type of formulation, and you try to demonstrate that you have some kind of conditioning benefit. So here you see the Colonial S18PF compared to other similar conditioning agents. And here, the higher the bar, that means the greater the reduction in combing force, which is a good thing. And so you can see here you had a 91% reduction in combing force, and that's compared to just a wet tress that had no conditioner in it. So on the next slide, you see a close-up. For those of you that have not seen a diastrom before, the tress would be mounted here. The comb would initially be somewhere here and then dragged through the tress. And in doing so, you would measure the combing force and then the reduction in combing force. So it's a very nice apparatus to objectively look at combing forces and to be a predictive of what you might find when you go into a hair salon. So this formula, before we leave this conditioning aid, is just a good example of how you would use stearometapropyl dimethylamine. Here's a curl co-wash. This could be used in between, shampooings to kind of keep your hair conditioned, soft, hydrated. And this is for people that don't necessarily want to wash their hair a lot and still have some good conditioning of their hair in between rigorous shampooing. So good example there. The next material we're going to talk about is in the area of odor reduction. And this is our Coliquat ON. It's similar to one of Colonial's existing offerings, which is Coliquat SMA that you see on the left. And that's soy ethyl morpholinium ethosulfate. And you can see if you look at the two molecules side by side, very similar. The oval area shows you the part of the Coliquat ON that was derived from HOSO. And so they're very similar, and you would expect them to have very similar properties. This material is patent pending. So if you go to the next slide, we can talk a little bit about the type of thing that we might do from a claim standpoint. So what we did is we took a series of jars like you see on the right with cotton balls, and we'd put the same level of an odor producing agent such as acetic acid on the cotton, and then dose it with, come behind it and dose it with varying amounts, increasing amounts of your odor reducing molecule. And you can see for the three substances tested, the Coliquat SMA, which we'd call our standard here, the Coliquat ON, as well as a third compound, which we don't identify, you see a nice reduction in odor. And this was a forced preference test. We had 10 panelists, and they were forced to rate each of the jars. And we found pretty good correlation even among 10 panelists. This is a very, very subjective way to do things. We've moved on to more objective and quantifiable means of doing odor reduction now. Next slide. So here's an example of a freshening hair mist. You come out of your workout, you're a little sweaty, you're away some of the scalp odor. Surface hair mist that you could use with the Coliquat ON. The third example is also commercially available, the Coliteric OAB, which is a betaine. Dan had talked about it, betaine in his. And so here's a HOSO-derived betaine. This is very good at thickening shampoos, body washes, facial washes, any type of rinse-off system that you might have. And in addition to that, leaves behind good skin or hair conditioning as delivered from these rinse-off systems. So as you'll see in the next slide, this provides outstanding viscosity build. And the R again here is from HOSO. Very busy slide, but let me try to unpack it a little bit with you. So as in anything, we would compare it to some existing standard. And the Colamid CMA is just cocamide MEA, which is a standard thickener in a lot of shampoos, facial washes. And you see that data right in here, buried in here. And 1% of the Coliteric OAB would be right in here, very comparable, but at a little bit higher salt load. But you can see as you go up to even 3%, just huge amounts of thickening provided by the Coliteric OAB. But once again, a great after feel because of the oleo group that might not be provided by something with a shorter chain length. So another good example of something that could be derived from HOSO. I think in that case, we didn't have a formula. The last one, the last example is Colux SAO. The Colux brands, these are amine oxides in the Colonial line, good foam boosters from low pH formulations and good viscosity build. Alkanolamides, which are, in the personal care industry, are largely not used a lot. This would be a good way to replace them and provide thickening with good electrolyte tolerance. Here is a picture of an amine oxide, and this one's derived from HOSO. So just a brief slide here. This just gives you an idea with your percent addition. As expected, you see the viscosity build in a typical surfactant cleansing system, but again, the ability to provide not only the thickening but a good after feel. So these four, okay, sorry, the color protection shampoo. So if no, that's fine, Chris, stay there. The other, go to the next slide. Sorry. There we go. So here's an example of a color protection shampoo with the Colux. In a color protection shampoo, you would want something that's not going to be very stripping and pull all the color out of your hair. And so you wouldn't want to have a lot of sulfate-based surfactants as an example. So here's a very good example of a good color protection shampoo with the Colux providing great thickening attributes. Next. So that brings us to the end. I think 4 good examples: a conditioner, a deodorizer, thickener, and an amine oxide for foaming that have been developed. As I said, many other candidates are under development, and it just highlights how good high oleic soybean oil and hydrogenated soybean oil are for product development. The management here at Colonial wishes to thank the USB for this funding that's now 3 years plus, and we're very pleased to be part of an effort with others in advancing the use of soybean oil for the development of effective, sustainable, environmentally friendly, and palm-free surfactants. And all the names down there at the bottom got jumbled up, but I got to acknowledge all the many men and Molly in our group that have developed this data. And Rob Rowe, I know you're out there. Sorry to acknowledge Rob Rowe and Omnitech, who has stood between us and the U.S. United Soybean Board, and Rob has been very instrumental in helping us in this project. So thank you for your attention, everybody, and look forward to answering some questions later.
That's a great presentation, Rob. We really appreciate it. Your team has done a fantastic job taking this technology and really being the first to commercialize out in the marketplace a high oleic soybean oil based surfactant. So congratulations again on this. I'd like to move on then to our last presenter. This is on biosurfactants, and as we know, these are growing exponentially. However, really few companies have successfully scaled and commercialized any biosurfactants in the marketplace. So this leads us to our final speaker from Janelle Biosurfactants. And I'm excited to say that they also received the Presidential Green Chemistry Award back in 2004. Janelle Biosurfactants manufactures natural rhamnolipid surfactants as an alternative to traditional synthetic surfactants. Tom Overbeck obtained his PhD in food science from Utah State University with a focus on improving industrial biotechnology processes. He joined Janelle as a research scientist and expanded his experience to provide valuable contributions in several biotechnology areas, including the natural biosurfactants. So it is at this time, it's my pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Overbeck as he expands our knowledge on Janelle's rhamnolipids technology. Tom?
Yeah, thank you for that introduction and the opportunity to speak here today. I'd like to go ahead and apologize in advance. I do know that I have a very monotone voice, so please bear with me, and hopefully I won't lull you to sleep during the presentation. I'd like to introduce you today to Janelle and share with you our natural rhamnolipid biosurfactant products and discuss potential opportunities for development of rhamnolipid biosurfactants using soybean oil. Janelle was founded in 1995 by Dr. Nirajnan Gandhi and Josephine Gandhi. Today, the company remains family-owned and operated and is comprised of over 125 employees. Our headquarter location, located in Saukville, Wisconsin, is home to both Janelle Biotech and Janelle Biosurfactant. This 240,000 square foot facility houses production, R&D, administration, and temperature-controlled warehousing. Our 55,000 square foot facility in Shaken, Germany, is home to Janelle Bioproducts. At Janelle Biotech, our product portfolio consists of natural dairy flavors, natural flavor chemicals produced through fermentation of sustainable resources, high-quality probiotics and cultures, and our expanding vegan flavors. At Janelle Biosurfactant, we manufacture natural rhamnolipid biosurfactants produced with an array of formulations targeted to meet customer needs. We produce an effective, natural, renewable, eco-friendly, and an organic biofungicide using rhamnolipids. At Janelle Biosurfactant, we also manufacture highly effective antimicrobial solutions for direct and indirect contact applications. At Janelle, we strongly believe in investing in continual R&D for the development of novel products, product improvements, and optimization of manufacturing processes. We have in-house technical and quality support to ensure that our products are manufactured in accordance with the highest quality standards. Our on-site pilot facility allows us to scale processes from the benchtop to full-scale production while providing flexible capacity to meet customer needs. On-site temperature-controlled warehousing allows us to provide short lead times. We maintain a broad portfolio of certifications for our products to meet customer requirements. Our optimized manufacturing processes, flexible capacity, and quality support allow us to provide customers with high-quality products at great prices. In 2004, Janelle Biosurfactant was awarded the Presidential Green Chemistry Award. Our Zonix product was given EPA approval as a biofungicide, and the EPA has recognized the safety of rhamnolipids by listing it as an exemption of a tolerance. In 2015, Janelle Biosurfactant was awarded the Green Thumb Award from the Direct Gardening Association for Zonix. Janelle Biosurfactant provides products with an Organic Materials Review Institute listing. Our Zonix biofungicide is widely effective in controlling fungal diseases such as late blight, downy mildew, black rot, and pythium. This product works immediately upon contact, does not contain any harmful metals, is OMRI listed, EPA registered, and sold in an easy-to-dispense bottle. Our natural rhamnolipid biosurfactant products have numerous advantages over traditional synthetic surfactants. They are readily biodegradable, have low environmental toxicity, and are safe. They maintain effective surfactant capabilities over a wide pH and temperature range. They are sustainably produced using only renewable resources. Rhamnolipid biosurfactants can be used at lower usage rates than synthetic surfactants and have inherent antimicrobial properties. Janelle's natural rhamnolipid biosurfactants are produced using a proprietary microbial isolate and a controlled fermentation. The resulting product of this fermentation is an amphiphilic rhamnolipid mixture comprised of mono and dirhamnolipids. Rhamnolipids are a class of glycolipids with a rhamnose moiety alpha link to a fatty acid tail group. Monorhamnolipids contain one rhamnose moiety and dirhamnolipids contain two. The fatty acid tail length and ratio of mono to dirhamnolipid can vary depending upon the fermentation process. Changes in the ratio and tail length can affect the surfactant properties of the product. Our rhamnolipid production process begins with a natural fermentation of all renewable resources. Upon completion of the fermentation, the process is terminated and the fermentation broth is sterilized and centrifuged. The rhamnolipids are extracted from the aqueous solution using a series of extraction steps, resulting in concentrated solutions with high purities. The product is then standardized and analyzed for quality. We are able to provide an array of different product formulations depending on the customer's intended application and requirements. Our natural rhamnolipid biosurfactants have a diverse array of applications. As previously mentioned, they are commonly used in agriculture as a biofungicide. They are also applied in agriculture as adjuvants and wetting agents due to their excellent surfactant characteristics and green eco-friendly technology. The green and eco-friendly technical aspects of our natural rhamnolipids also make them popular for environmental remediation and cleaning applications. Our rhamnolipid products have good foaming activity and perform well in personal care and cosmetic applications. Genial natural rhamnolipids make great replacements for synthetic surfactants and applications where there is an importance placed on sustainable and eco-friendly green technology. The critical micelle concentration, or CMC, is a measure of the concentration of a surfactant at which micelles form. Below the CMC, there are large decreases in the surface tension as the surfactant concentration is increased. At and above the CMC, the surface tension remains relatively consistent, and increasing the surfactant concentration does little to improve the surface tension. The CMC is an important measure of surfactants, with a lower CMC being a desirable characteristic. Our rhamnolipids products, commonly named with a JBR designation, have a lower CMC and surface tension than synthetic surfactants, allowing them to be applied at lower usage rates and formulations. The surface tension of our JBR products is 28 millinewtons per meter. Accredited third-party environmental testing has demonstrated that our natural rhamnolipids are both biodegradable and environmentally friendly. Third-party safety testing of our natural rhamnolipids shows that they are safe and non-toxic, but minimally irritating to the eyes. Research studies examining the biofungicidal ability of our Zonix products have demonstrated it to be effective in lysing zoospores on contact, capable of controlling late blight better than conventional treatment, and showed it to be protective against plant mildews. Published research studies on the antibacterial properties of our natural rhamnolipid biosurfactants have demonstrated the ability to inhibit gram-positive bacteria. Our rhamnolipids were also shown to work synergistically with and increase the effectiveness of other antibacterial agents due to an increase in permeability of the bacterial cell wall. Additionally, our rhamnolipids also showed the ability to prevent and disrupt biofilm formation. Research evaluating different oils and fermentations for rhamnolipid production indicated that increased oleic acid concentrations and decreased linoleic acid concentrations may be beneficial for rhamnolipid production due to an increased affinity for oleic acid over linoleic acid, and this resulted in increased rhamnolipid yields. As Rob previously mentioned in his presentation, high oleic soybean oil is a great candidate for higher concentrations of oleic acid. When we compare the fatty acid composition of high oleic soybean oil with other oil feedstocks, the very high oleic acid and low linoleic acid concentrations make it potentially the most promising fermentation substrate for increasing rhamnolipid yields. Because of its potentially preferential fatty acid composition, we plan to evaluate high oleic soybean oil as a substrate in our rhamnolipid production. We have previously demonstrated the capability to produce rhamnolipids using soybean oil as a fermentation substrate and have plans to continue this work. Our extensive experience in R&D and production of rhamnolipids should allow us to optimize these processes and potentially increase our yields. After we have new rhamnolipid products produced using high oleic soybean oil or soybean oil, we will need to determine any potential changes in the rhamnolipid composition and measure the surfactant properties of the products. These products can then be evaluated in application formulations as hopefully a more cost-effective, green, and eco-friendly surfactant replacement. Well, thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation today. I hope that I've at least piqued your interest in our natural rhamnolipid biosurfactant products and our future developments with soybean oil. If you have any questions or would like additional information, please don't hesitate to reach out and contact me. You can find my contact information up at the upper left-hand corner of this slide. Thanks.
That's great, Tom. Thanks for your insight. I think we can all agree that this is just very intriguing technology, and it's remarkable that you really are one of the first to market commercially with these rhamnolipids. So congratulations to you and your team. So at this point, we have completed all 3 speaker presentations for today, and we hope you found that they were very helpful to you. So at this time, we're going to be presenting a few panel questions for discussion. And we ask also that as an attendee, if you have any questions, type them into the Q&A box. I see there's a couple in the chat box, and we will get to as many as time allows. So on the first question, when did your organization start exploring soy for surfactant applications? And really, what inspired your company? So Dan looks like he's ready to answer this question. Would you like to start us off?
Sure. So about 12 to 14 years ago, you started seeing the newer traits of soy coming out. And for our work at the time, we were focused on lubricants and how to exploit those traits. And then I'd say probably about 4 years ago, we started saying, well, what chemistries does a high oleic soybean make most sense? And there were 2 different chemistries. One was hydroformylation, hydrogenation, to make a methoxy group at the olefin site. And the second was to do epoxidation ring opening. And so, then we said, okay, well, what's next? We made some surfactants out of the hydroformylated hydrogenated material, and then said, what else can we do with the epoxide? So we said, why not have a dual functional, where we have a chelating capacity from a biomaterial that we knew we couldn't react with commodity soy.
Well, very good. Anyone want to add on to that? I think a lot of you covered that already in your presentation. So the next question is, what do you feel is the biggest barrier to market acceptance and widespread commercialization of soy-based surfactants? So Tom, would you like to lead us off on that one?
Yeah, for us, the biggest challenge with rhamnolipid biosurfactants is making them cost competitive in the surfactant industry. Right now, rhamnolipid biosurfactants are produced as a specialty surfactant molecule. So if we can find substrates in our fermentation that will allow us to increase the yield and decrease the production costs, such as the high oleic soybean oil, that would be a huge benefit in our fermentation processes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Dan or Rob, would you like to add on to that at all?
I can. So for us, it's more, Battelle doesn't manufacture things. So for us, it's finding a good partner who can take things to the final market.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I don't think people realize the multitude of chemistries you have for licensing. So it's ripe for a partnership. There's no doubt on that. So I'm going to move on to the next question. What advice would you like to provide our audience based on the lessons you learned that would help them accelerate their use of soy-based surfactants or soy in developing their own surfactants?
Yeah, I think first, if you're looking for something with the high content of oleic, as all of us referred to in our presentations, look no further. You've got a great starting block, building block in high oleic soybean oil. And also that oleo group that you can incorporate then in your surfactant, provides some of the properties that we've all talked about, whether it's the thickening, the coating, the shine, lubricity, whatever. So again, if you're looking for that type of thing, start with the HOSO. And a couple other parting comments on that. Soybean oil, particularly the high oleic, is in high demand, and so I recommend before you get too much further in what you're doing, make sure that you've got your supply chain nailed down going forward. And last of all, the obvious one here, let's support our U.S. growers. By using these products, we're supporting them and just supporting a domestic product.
Sounds like between the three of you all looking at HOSO-based surfactants, we need to get those farmers to start growing some more high oleic soybeans, right?
I agree.
They'll get going on that next year. Did anyone else want to add on to that? Okay. Moving on to in formulating new products, is sustainability a factor in selecting ingredients, especially when it comes to surfactants? You have a multitude of applications. Are there other stronger factors? Tom, what do you feel about that? However, you're coming from biosurfactants, but
Yeah, so for us, because we're working with biosurfactants and our products are produced with all sustainable resources, that's a major criteria for us, is making sure that all the ingredients and components of our rhamnolipid products are manufactured using sustainable ingredients.
What about anything from performance? Are you leading with sustainability or are you leading with performance?
So it's both. I mean, we need the rhamnolipids to produce in performance, but sustainability is also an important factor of that. So the performance can vary, and as I mentioned in the presentation, that'll vary depending upon the ratio of the mono and dirhamnolipids. While mono and dirhamnolipids both have excellent surfactant capabilities, there can be some variance in the performance in different applications based on that ratio, but they still ultimately end up performing very well in surfactant applications as surfactants. So the sustainability is a major factor for us.
Yeah, I'd also add, sustainability coming from an end user and their interest in things being sustainable, but also from a sourcing type unit. So you see a lot of bio-based ethylene oxide coming onto the market now to make ethoxylate surfactants that are bio-based, but also they're sourced here from corn in the US, right?
That's exactly it. Rob, did you want to add anything on to that?
No, obviously, in everything that Colonial's doing, sustainability is a big driver. So that definitely is an attractive attribute of the soybean oil.
That's exactly right. I want to slip in one more question, then we'll get to our audience. In your opinion, what are some of the more important properties of either the conventional or high oleic soybean oil that makes it useful to your technology? Dan, you've been at it many, many years.
Sure. I don't know about that many, but so Rob had mentioned earlier, he was seeing lubricity, thickness, shine in his products as being, significant interest to the final application. But other areas, when you're changing functionality in the center for a high oleic, you have about a C8 or C9 aliphatic tail to do your surfactancy. When you go to commodity soy, that chain becomes shorter. It's more of a C5. And then if you go to linolenic, which isn't super high in soy, but it's in commodity significantly, then you end up with only a C2, C3. So you're not going to get much surfactancy out of it. So I really think the traits, the fatty acid distribution are important. In high oleic, it allows you to have more of a standard form with the lower saturate levels.
That's great. I would agree with that. Well, we do have some questions in the Q of A. Yes, this recording will be made available. And one more question, does soy-based surfactants have higher performance / cost than conventional surfactants? I think they mean, the high oleic, yes.
So high oleic versus commodity. So
Mhm.
just to give an example for the ones I was showing, your break-even pricing of amphoteric would be about 83 to 89 cents a pound, and your cocamidopropylbutane that we were replacing is probably around $1.22 a pound right now. So you have a significant profit margin and benefit because soy can get you at higher scale.
Mhm. And I see there's a question in the chat box. A number of soybean oil feedstocks are being introduced in North America and they're GMO. What is the response to these materials in the European community at this time? Someone like to take a stab at that? I'm sure you've all had experiences with the European markets.
I would say I think the Europeans that I've spoken to are more interested in things that replace petroleum products than the GMO aspect, because really what we're talking about for these applications are soy as a chemical, not a food.
Mm-hmm. Robert,
But
Tom,
again-
do you want to add on
but
to
again,
that?
Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, but again, when it comes to the whole GMO, whether it's Europe, US, whatever, there are non-GMO varieties available, flavors available, and so I really think if that is that important to you, you can find your source.
Okay. Here's another question. Could you please explain again which is the soy-based EDTA alternative? Dan, did you want to take that one on?
Yeah, I'd responded in chat, but I'll go ahead. So there's different technologies. So we have some that are based off of glycerol and soy meal. Those seem to do better in things like dishwashing applications because traditionally you would measure a chelator EDTA with a Calcon indicator. And when you change chemistries, they don't always trigger that Calcon indicator like EDTA does, goes from pink to blue. So we had made quite a few different fatty acid based EDTA replacements. And you just need to remember that your capacity changes and drops as you increase that as a function of weight. So we had some applications where we needed chelation that could penetrate an organic surface.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we developed those materials. However, it is interesting if you do the typical Calcon indicator solution, you end up with a foam that's blue instead of just a liquid that turns blue.
Okay, well, that's all we have time for at this time for questions. And we want to really tell everyone how much we appreciate your attendance and hope you found that this was an informative and productive webinar to attend. All our speakers' presentations will be available. If you want to reach out to Omnitech, we can give you copies of the slides, and also this webinar will be posted on Omnitech's YouTube channel. So at this time, on behalf of the United Soybean Board, Smith Buckland, and Omnitech International, we'd like to thank you for your interest, and we really encourage you to reach out to us if you're interested in learning more about USB funding or any assistance in technical or commercial development of soy-based products. Also, you can learn more by visiting the website usesoyforthat.org. And also, we are planning our next webinar next quarter, and the topic will be high performance and sustainable rubber compounds made with soy.